travel a lot. I'm constantly going through security, always behind that person that's never left their house before. They always want to ask me questions like, can I bring soup on the plane? It's homemade soup. I'm like, you should ask them. For an ID, can I use a fishing license? Should I take off my shoes and my pants? Yes, you should. Airport security is annoying. It's nothing compared to international travel, like going through customs and immigration. That's so intense. They're dressed like SWAT team members. I always get so nervous. I'm like, do I have heroin on me? I don't even know what heroin looks like, but I might have accidentally packed some. There's that mini interview with the customs agent. What do you plan to do in our country? Murder people. You got me. I wasn't ready for your trick questions. I always feel like an idiot when I travel internationally. Some of it is I don't know the metric system. It's not like I wasn't exposed to it. When I was growing up, they're like, learn the metric system. Everyone learn the metric system. Big switch coming up. And then 10 years later, they're like, never mind. It's too hard. It's based on tens. Let's go buy an SUV. So now I can't ask a distance when I visit another country. I'm like, how far is that? They're like, that's 500 kilometers. I'm not in the Olympics. This isn't a James Bond film. What's it in normal speak? I don't speak any other languages. I have friends that speak Spanish and French and Portuguese. I don't care. I speak English, the language Jesus spoke. At least he did in the movie I watched. I always love doing that joke. There's always a couple of faces in the audience like, don't say that. Because you travel internationally, you realize some people don't like Americans. I mean, the Canadians like us, and the Israelis like us. The Australians like Americans so much, it makes you question their judgment. You should read some of our history. But I get a kick out of what Europeans don't like about Americans. I was like, you Americans are dumb. You know nothing about Europe. It's not that we're dumb. We're just not that interested. Sorry, I don't want to learn more about your windmill country. He's going to get a wooden shoe in his ass. First time I did that joke, the whole front row was Dutch people. And they didn't care, or they did. I don't know. They have no emotion. It doesn't matter. He's the most anti-Dutch comedian ever. Obviously, I love traveling internationally. The only negative, too many foreigners, right? The weird thing is you travel around the world, and you realize pretty quickly people are the same wherever you go. Wherever you go, there are good people, and there are Russians. See, the reason that's funny is because we were all raised with this bigotry towards Russians. I have a friend, he was born in Russia. He moved here when he was 3, and I still think he might be a spy. We don't know. The best is when you're visiting a country and someone thinks you're a native. I was waiting for a cab in Stockholm, and this Swedish lady turned to me, and she was like, Bjorn Borg, Bjorn Borg. That's not what she said. That's what I heard. But I knew in that moment that once this lady found out I was American, she was going to be disappointed. So I just decided that I was not going to speak any language she spoke. She was like, Bjorn Borg, Bjorn Borg. And I was like, ah, 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 ah. She was like, tu parlez-vous français? And I was like, ah, 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 ah. She was like, do you speak English? And I was like, that woman is now my wife. It's just like The Notebook. What? Still there. I wouldn't mind being in shape. You know who was in really good shape was Jesus. Nothing like the topic of Jesus take the air right out of the show. That's what he would have wanted. Hey, when you bring up my name, I want people to be really uncomfortable. And it's not just the Christians. Everyone's like, too soon. It's only 2,000 years ago. Let it breathe, buddy. But Jesus was in amazing shape, which is especially impressive considering he could multiply bread whenever he wanted. Boom, pretzel bread. The Bible doesn't specify what type of bread he multiplied. I imagine it was pretzel bread. Boom, pretzel bread. Boom, garlic nuts. That's why he had all those followers. Come on, maybe I'll make some focaccia bread. This is how people walked in biblical times. They were really into that Beyonce Formation video. How many Beyonce references is he gonna have? But who knows, maybe Jesus could multiply the bread, but he had no control over what type of bread it was. He was like, you want some bread? Boom, pumpernickel. I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Still free bread, everyone. Let me try this again. Boom, Melba toast. That's never happened before. That's the big guy playing a trick on moi. Of course, Jesus was multiplying the bread to illustrate a point. He was like, I can give you bread that can feed you, but I can also give you bread that can feed your soul. But you know, everyone was like, yeah, I'll just take the food bread. I prefer the food bread to the soul food bread. Unless that's what you call cornbread. Because I love corn. Can you make pizza? I love pizza. I realize religion jokes make some people uncomfortable, especially the ones that are going to hell. Don't you dare! Get back to your regular food jokes.
Wow, that was amazing. I feel like we really connected. I think you're ready to move the relationship to subscribe. If the button wasn't down there, subscribe. Just do it. Do it.